At 7:22 in the morning, Phoebe was standing in my kitchen, in wool socks that weren't hers, holding a mug of coffee she'd made without asking, reading the back of my cereal box like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever seen. She didn't hear me come in, and for about 4 seconds, I just stood there in the doorway watching her mouth move slightly as she read the nutritional information on a box of Shreddies. Then she looked up. "Did you know there are only 160 calories per serving?" she said. "That seems low." "Good morning to you too," I said. She turned back to the box. "I'm just saying, it seems like a lie. That was 3 weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with that morning ever since. I should back up." Phoebe and I met in the second year of university, in a sociology lecture neither of us particularly wanted to be in. She sat down next to me because I had an extra pen, and she needed one, and that was it. That was the whole origin story. No drama, no lightning bolt, just a big ballpoint, and bad overhead lighting in a lecture hall that smelled like old carpet. We became friends the way you do when you're 20, slowly and then completely. Study sessions that turned into dinners that turned into walking home even when home was in opposite directions, walking home that turned into standing outside one of our buildings for another 40 minutes just to keep talking. By third year, we were in the same friend group, at the same parties, complaining about the same professors. By the time I graduated, Phoebe was just part of my life. The kind of friend you don't think about losing because the thought doesn't even occur to you. Like losing your own arm. After graduation, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the East End of Toronto. One of those older buildings with radiator heat and a window in the bathroom that doesn't quite close all the way, which is a problem in February, but actually kind of nice in April. Phoebe was in a place about 15 minutes away by transit, closer to the Danforth, in a basement unit she'd been renting since our final semester. We still saw each other a couple times a week, still texted constantly, still the first person I'd call when something happened, good or bad. I worked as a junior project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, reasonable hours, decent pay, nothing glamorous. Phoebe was doing admin work at a nonprofit while she figured out what she actually wanted to do, which she'd been in the process of figuring out for about 2 years, and showed no signs of resolving anytime soon. She wasn't lost, exactly. More like she was taking her time. I didn't mind. I liked who she was while she was figuring it out. The thing I haven't said yet, and I'm going to say it now because it's the whole point of this, is that somewhere around the middle of our third year of university, I realized I had feelings for her. Not a crush, not a passing thing. I mean the kind of feelings that settle into you quietly and then refuse to leave. The kind where you're watching someone laugh at something on their phone and you have this sudden, specific ache in your chest that you don't know what to do with. I never said anything. I had reasons. She was my closest friend. We had mutual friends. I didn't want to make it weird. All the reasons people tell themselves when the real reason is just, I was scared of what would happen if she said no. So I kept it to myself. I got good at it. Years of practice. The night of the storm was a Friday in November. Phoebe had texted me that morning to ask if I was going to Connor Webb's birthday thing, and I want to be clear that I know the name sounds very generic, but Connor Webb is a real person, a guy we'd both known since second year, who worked in commercial real estate now and threw good parties, and was once one of those people who manages to stay friends with everyone without ever seeming fake about it. His birthday party was at a bar in Kensington Market, nothing fancy, about 30 people on a reserved section of the back patio with those heat lamps that do absolutely nothing. I told Phoebe yes, I'd be there. She said she'd probably show up around 9. She showed up at 9:15. I was at the bar getting a beer when she appeared beside me in a wool coat and her hair a little wet from the walk from the streetcar. She smelled like cold air and whatever shampoo she used. "You look frozen," I said. "I am frozen," she said. "Is there mulled wine?" There wasn't. She got a cider instead, and we went to find the rest of the group. The night went the way those nights do. Good conversation in pockets, moving between groups, the particular easy energy of being somewhere with people you've known long enough that you don't have to perform anything. I should say here that Phoebe wasn't drinking heavily. She had maybe 3 drinks over 4 hours, which is not a lot. But Phoebe is also small, and she hadn't eaten much that day. She mentioned it at some point, Something about a weird work situation that had her too anxious to eat properly. And it was a cold night, and she'd been standing outside most of the evening, and sometimes things just compound on each other. By 11:30, I noticed she was quieter than usual. Not dramatically, she wasn't stumbling, wasn't slurring, but I knew her well enough to notice. The way she was sitting, the way she laughed a beat late at something someone said. She was more tired than drunk, but tired in that particular way where your body has done more work than you realized. I went and sat next to her. Hey, I said, you doing okay? She said, which was not a yes. Do you want to head out? She looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as grateful and slightly embarrassed at the same time. I don't want to ruin your night. You're not, I said. I've got work tomorrow morning anyway. That was not true. I did not have work Saturday morning, but she didn't need to know that. We said goodbye to Connor, got our coats, and headed out into the night. It was raining by then, that kind of fine, cold November rain that gets into everything. Phoebe's place was closer to the bar, but her building had an issue. She'd mentioned it earlier in the week, something about a problem with her unit's heating that the landlord was in the process of addressing, which in Toronto rental terms means it could be fixed in a week or a month, or possibly never. She told me this again on the sidewalk, rain starting to beat on her coat. My apartment is going to be like 11 degrees, she said. I should have brought a warmer jacket. You can stay at mine, I said. I have the extra room. She looked at me. You sure, Phoebe? Yes. Obviously, yes. We took a cab, a Lyft, actually, which I paid for because it was on my account and it was raining, and I wasn't going to make an issue of it. $12. Not a big deal. In the cab, she leaned her head against the window and was quiet most of the ride, watching the rain streak across the glass. I sat beside her and looked out the other window. The city was that particular version of itself it becomes late on a rainy Friday, lit up and almost empty, like a film set after the shoot. Thanks for this, she said, not looking away from the window. Don't mention it, I said. When we got to my building, she was steadier on her feet than I expected. We took the elevator up. I unlocked the door. She went straight to the kitchen, got herself a glass of water without asking, drank half of it standing at the sink, and then turned to face me. I'm fine, she said. I just needed to get somewhere warm. I know you are, I said. I'm going to be mortified about this tomorrow. About what? You had a couple of drinks and it got cold and you needed a place to stay. That's not a story. She looked at me for a second. You always do that, she said. Do what? Make things smaller so I don't feel bad about them. I didn't know what to say to that. So I got her a spare toothbrush from the cabinet under the sink, still in the packaging, the kind of thing I keep around because my mother trained me to be prepared for house guests, and showed her where the extra blankets were in the closet at the end of the hall. She went to get ready for bed. I went back to the living room, turned off the overhead light, turned on the smaller lamp in the corner, and sat on the couch for a while, not doing anything, just sitting. At some point, I checked the weather on my phone. More rain tomorrow, clearing by afternoon. I heard Phoebe move through the hallway, heard the guest room door close, but not fully. It had never latched right, just rested in the frame. I'd meant to fix it for about 8 months. I sat there for another few minutes. Then I said quietly, to no one in particular, I really hope you're happy, eventually. Whatever that ends up looking like. I don't know why I said it out loud. I think sometimes you just need to hear a thing in the air. Then I turned off the lamp and went to bed. I woke up at 7 to my upstairs neighbor doing something that sounded like rearranging furniture, which is their hobby apparently. I lay in bed for a few minutes in that particular half-conscious state where you're aware that something is different but haven't yet identified what it is. Then I remembered Phoebe was in my spare room. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, went to the kitchen, started the coffee. While it was brewing, I went to get a clean mug from the cabinet, and that's when I noticed that one of my mugs, the big blue one I use every morning, was already out, already on the counter. I stood there for a second. Then I heard her. She came into the kitchen in her socks, thick wool hiking socks she'd apparently had in her bag, which felt very Phoebe, wearing her shirt from last night and draped over top of it, my fleece pullover. The dark green one I leave on the hook by the door because I grab it constantly. It came down almost to her mid-thigh. She was carrying the mug she'd apparently already helped herself to, which was the same mug I'd just been looking for. She stopped when she saw me. The machine beeped, she said. I figured you'd want coffee. Did you make it or did you pour what I just brewed? She looked guilty. I poured what you just brewed, so you got the first cup. You were asleep. I was in the other room. You were asleep, she said again firmly, and took a sip. I looked at her standing there in my kitchen in my fleece, perfectly at home, reading the back of the Shreddies box, and I had this feeling, a very specific feeling. Like something had shifted, like I was seeing a version of a thing I'd been thinking about for years and had never expected to actually see. I went and got another mug, poured myself coffee, stood across the counter from her. That's my fleece, I said. It was on the hook. That doesn't mean it's yours. It means it was available, she said. There's a difference. That's a very convenient interpretation. She put down the cereal box and looked at me. Are you actually upset about this? No, I said. I'm just making note of the situation. She went back to the cereal box. I'll give it back when I leave. I know you will. We were quiet for a while. The coffee was good. The rain had stopped overnight, and the morning light was doing that particular November thing where it comes through sideways and makes everything look slightly warmer than it is. Hey, Phoebe said, still looking at the box. Did you say something last night? After I went to the room, everything in me went very still. When, I said, I heard something. I wasn't fully asleep yet. It was quiet. I couldn't make out what it was. But I heard you say something. She looked up. What was it? This is the part where I want to tell you. I came up with something smooth and easy and completely deflecting. Some casual joke. Some perfect non-answer. I want to tell you that. But I'd been holding this for 4 years. And she was standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning in my fleece, looking at me with those steady brown eyes that I'd known since university, and something in me just let go. I said I hoped you'd be happy, I told her. Eventually. Whatever that looks like. She was quiet. That's a strange thing to say to an empty living room, she said. Yeah. Why'd you say it? I set my mug down on the counter. I looked at her. Because I meant it. And I've been meaning it for a while. And sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes you just need to say a thing out loud even if no one's going to hear it. She was still watching me. Her hands were wrapped around the blue mug. How long is a while? She asked. Phoebe, I'm asking seriously. I know you are. So. I looked out the window for a second. The street below was wet and empty. One streetcar going east. 4 years, I said. Give or take. She didn't say anything right away. The refrigerator made a sound. Somewhere outside a car door closed. 4 years, she repeated. Not like she was shocked. More like she was saying it to see how it sounded. I wasn't going to say anything, I told her. I wasn't going to make it weird. You're my closest friend and that matters more to me than whatever this was. So I wasn't going to. August, she said. I stopped. That's how long it's been for me, she said. Not 4 years, but about 14 months, I think. Maybe 15. I stared at her. She looked a little embarrassed. I kept waiting for a good time to say something, and then I'd convince myself I was reading it wrong. And then I'd decide I wasn't, and then I'd wait for a good time again. You could have just said something. You could have said something, she said. You had 4 years. That was okay. That was fair. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was this slightly stunned, slightly relieved laugh that I didn't entirely plan. She smiled. That particular smile she had, the one that started small on one side before it went anywhere else. So what do we do now? I said. She picked up the cereal box again, then put it back down. I think, she said, you could start by telling me you're not actually upset about the fleece. I'm not actually upset about the fleece. Good. She came around the counter, put her mug down next to mine, and looked up at me from about 2 feet away. And then maybe we figure the rest out as we go. That sounds extremely vague. It is extremely vague, she agreed. Okay, I said, and I meant it completely. She stayed for breakfast. I made eggs, scrambled because the pan's in rough shape and I didn't trust it for anything requiring finesse. She made toast. She kept the fleece on the entire time. At some point she said, for what it's worth, I think I've been in your kitchen more than mine this past year. And I said, I know. And she said, so that's probably something. And I said, that is probably something. After breakfast, she finally took off the fleece and handed it back to me, folded, which felt like an absurd level of formality for the situation. I hung it back on the hook. She put on her coat, wrapped her scarf around twice the way she always did. At the door, she turned around. Hey, she said. Hey, I'm glad you brought me home last night, Phoebe. You were completely fine. I know, she said. That's not what I meant. And then she left. I stood in my hallway for about 30 seconds doing nothing in particular. Then, I went back to the kitchen, poured myself the last of the coffee, and looked at the hook by the door. The fleece was there. She'd folded it and handed it back to me like it was a thing that was mine. But I think, and I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks, I think that's when the fleece stopped being just mine. I texted her at 11 that morning. Just, how's the heating situation? She replied 4 minutes later, still broken. Landlord says maybe Wednesday. I typed, guest room's still available. She replied with a single period. Which might sound like nothing, but with Phoebe, it means she's smiling and doesn't want to say so. I know her well enough to know that.